Okay, this is for the lower die 2 outer ring. We're going to be using revolves. That means we're going to be drawing this shape here with some of these dimensions down here and some of these dimensions up here to create this shape. So a few things we have to look at and make sure we get all the dimensions on there are important. So we're going to start with this line down here and have that as the base for our drawing. So again, I'm not going to give all the dimensions. I'm going to put the correct ones in, but you should always be checking the drawing to make sure that you are getting the right dimensions as you put them in. And all of these dimensions are going to be important. Some of them I'm going to put in afterwards. But make sure that I'm getting the basic sizes for everything that I need. One thing to note is if you see a dimension on here, it's not always exactly the dimension I put in. It is rounding them off to 3 places, and you can see many of these have 4 places for their measurements. So make sure that you get the right amounts from the drawing here as you're creating any of these shapes. And keep an eye on exactly what it is we're drawing. So some of these don't line up like I just did. I'm going to have to change some measurements here because those don't fit what we were hoping to have. And making mistakes is all part of it, so make sure that you are paying attention to what it is you got going on here. So that's the basic shape for this revolve here. We have a few dimensions missing, so we're going to put those in. And make sure that they're accurate as well. Some of these dimensions I'm pulling from up top, some of them I'm pulling from down the bottom. Pay attention to where the lines are and what those extension lines are touching or reaching, and put those correct numbers in. And as you get all the dimensions in, you'll see more and more of the lines becoming blue. That means they are the correct size and the correct place for what we want. So that's what we're going to have to be paying close attention to get the right measurements for what we need. Now that we've got it completely blue here, we know we're ready for our revolve. Now for that, we're going to zoom out a little bit here and create our axis for this revolve. I'm going to use a construction line. And I'm just going to put it above here. It doesn't have to be any particular dimension. But then we are going to create the dimension from the middle there to the outermost edge of our revolution. Then, using the program, we're going to make it do some of the math for us. Put in our diameter. Make sure that we have the correct diameter. And that will help us set up for our revolve. Once the revolve comes up, it already chooses the profile, you just need to show it the axis. So this is our basic shape that we need here. Now, one of the things that's going on with this is a couple little cutouts. So we have this tiny little cutout that goes along the side here, and it shows us in a detail picture there. And we also have this cutout right here that goes through sort of this top edge. Now they are important where they are in relation to each other. So I'm going to start with this cutout here. It creates this spot that opens up in our picture. So we're given the dimensions on that. We're going to draw a new sketch using that. So our new sketch is going to be on this outermost ring here. And as it lines up, straight up, we're going to need that. I'm going to use a construction line to kind of help center ourselves here. And then turn construction off, and I'm going to project geometry on this outer ring as well to help line myself up. Now I'm going to draw a line, a couple lines in here. They're going to be right along and hook up with this, the projected geometry as best I can. And then I'm going to make sure that everything using the constraints, use a vertical or in this case a horizontal constraint, because that's what seems to be working. Got that constraint on there already, good, so we can cancel that. And we're going to make sure that we have these lines being parallel. Then we need to just set our dimension between these two lines here. Get the right dimension. Then I also want to make sure that they're evenly spaced between those two. So I'm going to use that same dimension and line those up. Now that didn't get what I wanted. It took my construction line off the center, so I'm going to Control Z on that. I'm going to fix this line where it's at. That'll help that out. And then I'll come back in here and put the dimension in. Now this line got shorter over here for me, so I need to adjust that. Your lines may run a little bit different as well. So I'm going to use extend and trim here to make sure everything touches where I want it to. Everything's looking pretty good there. And I'm going to make sure that I'm not going over anywhere. And it looks like I'm not as I zoom in there, so I don't need to trim anything. If I needed to trim, I can use the trim to cut off either below or above the projected lines. If you see that happening, make sure that you do that. That will help a great deal when you finish your sketch and you need to make the extrusion cut here. So we're going to extrude that little bit, but we're going to make a cut with it. in the opposite direction there, and then we need to make sure that we get the right distance. It's just going down to this bottom part here. And so we know that that's a combination of these two measurements. Since this 1 inch is all the way out and the 0.844 is the other, we're going to use those as part of our dimension for the extrusion there. And I'm just going to put it in as a math problem. I don't want to figure it out. I want the computer to figure it out. And that will cut out that little space right there. Looks like I might have got a dimension off here because I cut down further than I thought it should. So I'm going to go back to my sketch, make sure I got the right dimensions everywhere. Oh, I see where I screwed up here with that measurement. So I'm going to redo that measurement in my drawing here and get it to the right spots. And that looks better now that I switched the placement of the extension lines. And that adjusted that as well. That's good. That's what we were looking for. All right. Now the next one, we're also going to do another sketch on this same face. We want to make sure that it is up and down again, facing the same direction. And so what we're going to do, we're going to use our project geometry again on these outer rings. And we're going to make the cut across here. Again, we're going to use a construction line so that we can line things up properly. And that's going to go all the way across because we're going to use it on both sides. I'm going to turn the construction line off though. And this time it's just going just a little bit here. And these are going to be some pretty small little bits that we have to make sure that are lined up. So I'm going to draw all these in to start with, and then I will line them up when I'm done. Alright, I'm going to fix this line, so we know that was important last time. I'm going to make things parallel so that they're all lined up nice and neat with each other. And then I can start putting my measurements in. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on these as I put these dimensions in. Now these dimensions go together, so I'm going to do this inner one at first. And then the outer one. That'll help keep things lined up. It should be lined up right on there. It's looking pretty good. Do the same thing on the other side. Could just start with one if I wanted. And then I'm going to double check my measurements to make sure that I got them right before I go on. And so these are all correct. Now one of the things I notice about this and that I'm going to use is this dimension here is approximately half of this dimension, which means this shape right here that's cut as a V in there. To do that, I'm going to use the taper command on our extrusion. And since that measurement's about half. That means those lines are going to be going at about 45 degrees. So I'm going to finish sketch on this. I'm going to extrude. And what I want to extrude, just these little bits in here. Make sure I zoom in and get those. Once I've got both of them, I'm going to adjust it as a cut. I'm going to then come to more, and our taper is going to be 45 degrees. And our distance is the dimension that they gave us in there. Now, as I start to look at it before I go forward, I notice that it's going out, not in. So back at my taper on the more command, I'm going to change it from 45 to a negative 45, and that cuts it in at the right angle. It's the opposite that we thought, what I was thinking. So I click OK. I'm going to back out of that. I'm going to see that I have that nice little groove going through there on both sides, and that's what I was after. So that's the finish for this, and remember, save everything to what they are called. On the document, lower die 2 outer ring. So that's what I'm going to save this as.